I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, August the 22nd, brought to you in part by the National Beef Wire. Today's spotlight is on the Paris Stockyards in Paris, Kentucky, brought to you by Safeguard. You can view Paris' sale today on nationalbeefwire.com on channel 6019. We've got a reluctant recovery underway after the market crisis that hit the cattle markets last week after that fire at Finney County, Tyson Fresh Meats, and everything that ensued after that. But your markets have not snapped right back like they should or like you would have hoped to, but we're catching a little bit more every day, and like I say, a reluctant recovery. Your live cattle contracts are within about $6 of where they were before the fire. Your feeder cattle contracts are only $2 to $3 back. Your cash fat cattle, or we haven't seen what they're going to trade at this week. We're clawing our way back, but things actually weren't that great before the fire. So to get back to $1.10 would be steady in the Southern Plains. We did have some $1.10 trade way out west in California on Wednesday, but we're trying to work our way back to that. Your cash feeder cattle, about like your feeder board, $2 to $3 back, maybe $5 in some spots, but the calf deal is what really suffered, and I've said that on the last several visits. These calves that are in the fall run here, they're what they have to do with the fire that happened at one plant in the Southern Plains there that's going to be long forgotten before those cattle even make the feedlot, let alone get on the show list. But your calf sales have been pretty sluggish, and they might have gotten that way anyway, because we're starting to see the beginning of the fall run here, especially on the video and things in the last week or so, and we don't know how good they would have been before the fire, but just kind of sluggish. Continuing to talk about what all went on last week, and everybody being upset. A lot of people are broke. Some people not going to make it through this deal. A lot of people losing their ranches. There's people in the farming community that are going broke and just as upset. Saw the headlines that we had a USDA official that had been threatened, and I just assumed that it was going to be a kind of lackadaisical PNS agent, but actually no, it was a USDA National Ag Statistics Service crop chief, and they didn't get into any specifics about how this individual was threatened, but it had to do with the Pro Farmer Crop Tour that's going around right now, and this fellow was due to speak there and had received some threats, and they believe, we don't know, but they believe it was from an upset farmer that was upset about the last couple of crop reports that have been really favorable to the crop, and of course bearish to your corn market. And we haven't got to the bottom of that. Could have been anybody that did that, and not sure how serious it was, but the fella didn't end up speaking at the crop tour stop like he was scheduled to. But we sure don't want anything like that happening. I tell you what, I was a USDA official or officer in charge for most of my career. I sure wouldn't have wanted to see that, but did definitely see the animals that a lot of your industry people felt for government employees, and back in those days I was probably called government guy or government reporter or government prick a lot more than I was my official name, but did not upset me to drop that moniker and go on and be known as an individual, which glad to be doing that here with DV Auction as market analyst for them. But that's never a good thing, and I saw one quote where a farmer was interviewed and he said it just made us all look like idiots, and that's for sure. But like we said, we don't know that was a farmer that had threatened him. It could have been anybody. But everybody's still wondering what to do. Anytime you start talking about checkoff dollars, a lot of your people get nervous and upset about it, and and fearing a referendum or fearing who's going to share in those dollars. And I realize that there are different rules that regulate how those dollars can be spent. Yeah, people were brainstorming, and have been for the last week and a half, almost two, as we try to think what in the world could we do about this deal. But the fact is, however the way the checkoff dollars are spent now, it's mostly burdened on your cattle producers. They're the ones that have to pay every time that a bovine changes hands, and a lot of those cattle get hit 5 or 6 times, especially whenever they come out of the southeast at a light weight and kind of are backgrounded along and grown and things like that, and they just keep hammering that same calf as it goes on. And the ones that get all the benefit from the checkoff dollars are your packers. They basically don't have to do a lot of advertising themselves, because there's plenty of checkoff dollars out there to advertise their beef, and of course all your big four are in the poultry and in the pork too, so they don't have to worry about that. They get the producers to advertise their products for them, and they can bathe in those profits that they get, the big margins. Looking at ways that we can try to fix this cattle market, and it might sound as far-fetched as some of these other ideas, but talking to a friend of mine that owns a market and just says, I don't understand what the problem is. Take your cattle to the sale barn, and I mean your fat cattle too. Your fat cattle in the auctions always bring a premium. I realize they're not getting the big strings there. They're not selling a lot of cattle fat in your markets ever since they quit trading them on the bricks and quit moving them through auctions at your river markets. I was lucky enough to get to work in some of your big stockyards. I reported to market South St. Paul, your nation's cow market, for a time there, and then they had a good fat cattle sale there. The buyers there supported the market because they wanted the cattle to keep coming in. I worked the markets at Lancaster stockyards in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They had some of the best top quality fat cattle I'd ever seen in my life, and the best anywhere, anytime coming through that market. Covered the last sale at Lancaster stockyards. It was an old time market like that. St. Joe stockyards was one of the last to sell fat cattle through the auction there at St. Joe stockyards. But I realize it's not a real doable deal now. There's several places that they do sell them. Tama, Dunlap, Iowa, they have a good sale at Worthing, South Dakota, at Sioux Falls Regional, have a really good sale that I talk about all the time at Stockman's in Yankton, South Dakota. Maybe we should do more of that. And I realize that it's 100 degrees in the Southern Plains. It's not real feasible there, but you're not going to have to take a 4% shrink. They may shrink 4%, but they're not going to take it off the top. You try to get those cattle in there, they might sell better if they're shrunk down a little bit, and you think, well, there's no fat cattle auctions. I'll bet you anything, if you called El Reno or Oklahoma City or Winter Livestock in Dodge City, Kansas, or Winter Livestock in Pratt, or any of the big sales across Missouri there, from Bowling Green to Missouri to Callaway Livestock, St. Joe Stockyards, Joplin. Of course, there's no fat cattle around there, but you get up in the northern parts, there is. You get up into Nebraska, all across the Dakotas. I'll bet you if you wanted to bring a sale barn, a string of fat cattle, they would be glad to have them. And then you could, like a guy was telling me this week, hey, it's too hot to sell your fats. Don't sell any fat cattle to these packers until it kind of starts cooling off, and then tell them they can pick them up there at the local sale barn at the highest bidder. Be interesting to see, but you don't see your feeder cattle sellers as frustrated as you do your fat cattle marketers week in and week out. Yeah, they may not be happy with what the market is. They may wish the cattle brought more, but they're not mad about the whole situation, about how it takes place. At least they get to run cattle in front of the people that are there, that are interested in buying the cattle, and for the most part, that's the fairest way to do it. And there's a lot of things sold at auction, whether it be cars or land or antiques or art. That's the best way to do it. I would think that one of these online finished cattle auctions would take off, but so far it has not. Maybe under the new ownership, the Fed Cattle Exchange will start to take off. Would like to see it. Would like to see some competition at any level in your fat cattle sales negotiated. But let's look at the things that happened on Wednesday. The board August live cattle futures up 87 cents at 102.67. October up 22 at $100.22. And feeder cattle futures for August up $1.07 at 137.37. September up $1.57 at 135.30. And you look at some of your technical analysis, and it just says basically that your cattle commodities were oversold with that big scare and that market crisis that happened last week after that fire. They're due to gain back at least what they lost. Your fat cattle sales have been almost non-existent so far this week, on the outside of a few auctions and just a couple of loads, not necessarily pins, but just a couple of loads of cattle here and there. They did have one load in Iowa that was confirmed at 172. I did hear that 172 dress bids were pretty widespread in the northern plains, Nebraska and Iowa and around, and they were offering those up pretty wide. Nobody ready to take those. 172 was the extreme top of last week's dressed range. So we're on the way to gaining a few dollars, and we kind of knew that the Packers would give us a couple of bucks just to kind of smooth things over and cool people off from what they were so frustrated with. And I think cooler heads are starting to prevail now, but would like to kind of strike while the iron was hot and people were ready to do something after this last week. And I'm not sure how strong people feel about it now. Did see that NCBA is having a conference call here on Thursday, and hopefully some leadership will rise to the top there, and they will make an attempt to do something. But we'll see what happens there. Your box beef cutout values were a little higher again, and select caught back up some more. But choice cuts on Wednesday afternoon, $241.74, up just 4 cents. Selects at $215.70, up $1.43. Still a huge choice select spread, over $26. That is huge, and a little bit better movement, although not a heavy movement, as these retailers are just buying kind of what they need. Although they do have some specials advertising coming up for Labor Day weekend, but they're not going to get any surplus at these levels. Your slaughter is keeping right up without that plant there at Holcomb, Kansas. But 347,000 through Wednesday is exactly the same as a week ago. Just 5,000 head off of a year ago, and we'll do all of our catching up on Saturday because that's when they have the room to do it. So even if we lag a little bit behind in the bulk of the week, by Saturday we can catch right back up and may have a bigger run than we did a year ago. Superior Livestock Bighorn Classic is going on there in Sheridan, Wyoming. Not a lot of stick out deals, but it's better. You can just tell that it's better. None of the cattle that need to go right into the feedlot, which a lot of those big calves, they were selling a lot of Northern Plains and Mountain State calves up there. A lot of those will have to go right into the feedlot, right off the cow. And that's never a lot of fun, especially if we have a winter like we did last winter, but hopefully it'll be a little more mild. But none of those cattle appear to pencil out on paper. Most of your steer calves, there were typical weights around the six weight category there, right off the cow at delivery this fall, bringing in the 150s and the 160s. And that may not be impressive to your ranchers out there, but it looks pretty high for guys that have been buying yearlings a little bit heavier and cheaper than that, that'll feed so much better. And those cattle just really don't pencil out. They don't look good at all on paper, but it's starting to get a little better around. Although most of your sale barns are not back up to full speed yet, and nobody real excited about hauling cattle in unless they absolutely have to. But your real-time index on Cattle Market Central late in the day on Wednesday at 138.49, that was up $2.04. So it's starting to recover. It's only $2 or $3 under what it was there before the fire. So starting to make some recovery and get kind of back to normal, whatever normal is. But OKC West, El Reno, Oklahoma, only 2,400 head for their 2-day sale. So that gives you an idea of how light receipts are around, and people just kind of scared to market, and that probably messed things up as much as anything. Now we're going to be kind of behind, and as guys get a little bit more comfortable with selling their cattle, now we're going to be seeing bigger receipts than what we really need to be choking. It would have been nice if we could have kept those kind of moderated out like normal, but we'll have some bigger runs coming here to wind up your basic summer before we get past Labor Day, and then after Labor Day there'll be a lot of calves to sell, and they'll be coming right through to the end of the year. But only about 1,900 head in El Reno for your Wednesday yearling feeder sale, but feeders were $3 to $5 higher. You look at this report on Cattle Market Central there, right from the block automated report, and you can see that the prices were definitely higher. Look at your most popular weights there. 237 head of 7-weight steers, average 769 at 135.71. That was about 2 1/4 cents higher, $2.25 higher, I mean. 420 head of 8-weight steers averaged 854 at 131.88. That was about $3.50 higher. Look at your heifers. 278 head of heifers in the 6-weight category, averaging 649 with a weighted average price of 131.16. That was up nearly $5. And 361 head of 7-weight heifers averaged 737 at 126.56, and that was $1.67 higher than the weighted average from the previous week. Bassett had a sale. Not one of their big monster sales, but a pretty darn good sale here late in the summer. Had about 1,700 head there, and Bassett is Bassett, even when things are messed up and nobody's happy with the market. They had some awfully good sales there. They did call the market $3 lower on the few comparable sales of steers they had to the sale they had 2 weeks ago. But look at this stick out sale. 90 head of 709-pound steers bring 166 1/4. And that's just Bassett, Highway 20, Yellow Brick Road, Sand Hills. That's the only thing you can say about that. But I'm going to tell you, the highest big steers that I saw, including the Northern Plains or out west or on the video or anywhere, but the highest big steers I saw was at Bluegrass Stockyards at Albany, which is one of their smaller locations, but had a heck of a sale on Wednesday there. 114 head of 905-pound black steers bring $1.41, Albany, Kentucky. And that's your feeder flash for Thursday.